Hey everybody, welcome to episode 8 of How to Build a Game Studio. This week we have our very first guest, and I'm excited to say that it was Joe Mirabello of Terrible Posture Games. He created Terrible Posture Games quite a few years ago after his time working on the MMO version of Kingdoms of Amalur that never saw the light of day, unfortunately. But he used the time afterwards to create the indie games Tower of Guns and more recently Mothergunship. And we get into a really good conversation about being an indie studio in the time frame that he started and even now. So it's an awesome listen. We delve into a bunch of different topics. Worth going out of your way to spend the hour with me and Joe Mirabello. So, hey, have a listen. All right, today I am joined by Joe Mirabello from Terrible Posture Games. How's it going, Joe?
Fine. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to have you here on the podcast. We've known each other for a little bit, quite a
Yeah.
few years.
Ever since the old Tower of Guns days. So we're talking about 4 or 5 years now at this point. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you. You were the first one I thought of when I wanted to start bringing on other guests outside of our studio. So I know that you came from kind of almost the same place we did, working on bigger games, and then going to obviously your own thing. So I thought that was a good place to start for us.
Right. I'm flattered that I was the first one you thought of. Thanks. So yeah, it sounds like from what I know about you all, it sounds like you've got some AAA folks who then have gone kind of the indie route and are kind of accruing a team over time. And that is kind of what I did. Um,
So for you, you worked on bigger games. You worked on like Kingdoms of Amalur, which still holds up, I
Thanks.
will say.
I did not work on Reckoning itself, other than like a few little concept stuff. Like, so Reckoning there were two studios involved at 38 Studios. Okay, so quick history. Before I worked on that, I worked at Iron Lore on Titan Quest, and then I went over to 38 Studios to work on their MMO for the Amalur world. And then while we were working on the MMO, 38 Studios bought Big Huge Games, which was working on the action RPG that became Reckoning. And the amount of work I did on Reckoning was very minimal, but I had some. The extent of my work was like 2 or 3 concepts that were then used as the basis for them to reconcept, because there were like concepts in our world, in the Copernicus, like the MMO world. And then they took it and they were like, okay, so the action RPG takes place 1,000 years offset. How would this zone look 1,000 years offset from that game? So that kind of thing. So there was
I
some
see.
inspiration there, very minimal there. And then I did fly down there once to go visit the Baltimore team and see what they're up to and talk to them a little bit about how we ran the production schedule up where we were and kind of do some production consulting. So that was like literally it. But they made an awesome game. The Reckoning guys were fantastic. I'd worked with a bunch of them back at Iron Lore, so it was kind of like seeing some old friends there. The work they did was great. So yeah, but to my extent, I can't claim credit for anything on Reckoning, just to set the record straight, other than just being an early witness to it.
Well, just speaking of that franchise, now that someone bought the actual rights, would you like to see? Do you think? I doubt your work will ever see the light of day, unfortunately. But what do you
Yeah.
think? What would you like to see coming from that stuff that you helped work on?
I don't know. Like THQ Nordic bought the rights, if I'm not mistaken,
Yes,
and I feel like they've been chasing me around my entire career because they also bought all of the Titan Quest rights from THQ when
that's
THQ
true.
went under. And so like THQ Nordic is slowly buying up everything I've ever worked on. Um, like maybe they want to buy Tower of Guns. I thought about
THQ
that.
Nordic.
No.
If
Hey, you guys want to complete the set? No.
hey, I got some contact info that you need. So
No, they've done a really interesting job with Titan Quest, where they've like put out expansions. They've seen it get a second life on Switch. They brought it to iPad and to iPhone. They brought it to mobile, and so like I feel like their strategy, Nordic strategy, is going to be to do similar, where they're going to take Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning, and they're going to probably port it to Switch. They're probably going to port it to other platforms. Maybe they'll work on an expansion pack for it. They're very good at um, taking an existing game and basically injecting new life into it. I do not know if they will, and I don't think they will probably take the MMO and do anything of it. I don't think. So I think that what they will do is give Reckoning fans more stuff to play with, more ways to play it. It seems like that's what their strategy is, and it seems like it works pretty well for them.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I'm looking forward to that day when I see more Reckoning content. So, because I really enjoy that game.
Good,
Um,
I'm glad. Yeah, it's quite a few. Man, oh, I had a lot of friends on that team just from outside of 38, like before even 38 came in and bought Big Huge. It was like when Iron Lore began to close down. A bunch of the team went to 38 Studios. A bunch of the team went to like Harmonix. A bunch of the team went to Big Huge. It was like all the East Coast studios. And so, yeah, it was like a lot of old friends at that studio. So it was nice to see them do good work. Um, but yeah, that's um, neither here nor there because now they're closed down.
yeah, unfortunately. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
so
unfortunately, that's the end of a studio, I guess. Not what this proposal for this episode is supposed to be about, I guess.
so when things end, they must begin, and
True.
that's where we come to Terrible Posture Games. So what got you into what made you decide to take the leap and actually build your own studio?
Okay, so when I was working at 38, I started out as just a artist, and then I gradually became more of a senior artist on the environment side, and then I gradually became more and more technical and became a technical and then senior technical artist. The whole time, I guess it was like 5 years I was there, I was getting more and more and more technical, and that was empowering me to basically go and feel like I had the confidence and the skills to, if not make something on my own, at least kind of know how to teach myself how to make something on my own. And so that's what I did with Tower of Guns. And originally, I didn't think it was going to be a studio. I was like, okay, 38 Studios, for your listeners who don't know, that studio went disastrously out of business. It was like in the news all over Rhode
Yeah.
Island and stuff, and all over New England. And it's because Rhode Island had paid to relocate the entire studio to Rhode Island in exchange for a gigantic loan. And so it was like this huge deal when it went bankrupt because it was like state money involved. And I don't know. I mean, I know very little about that side of it. I was just sitting there doing my tech art stuff.
Right.
But it came out of nowhere for the people working on the team. You know, you're talking about 300 people who thought they were like set to get this game out the door. Um, and we were kind of, a lot of us were completely caught off guard by the news. So when that studio closed, a lot of my teammates were scrambling to find gigs. There were people who had, there were people who had mortgages they had to pay, people who had medical issues they needed to resolve. One person whose spouse was about to give birth and their health insurance just vanished, like things like that. And for me, I live very low, well below my means, I guess is the way to say it. And so, like, I didn't spend any money. I'd saved up some. I kind of always talked to my wife about going indie one day. I was like, maybe someday I'll do it. Maybe someday. Kind of never really sure if I ever would.
Yeah.
And when this happened, I looked at all my friends who needed gigs, and then me myself who potentially wouldn't need to compete with them in the job market, and be like, okay, maybe now's a good chance for me because I'm in a good position here to actually go indie to give it a try. And I thought that it would be maybe a short, like 1 year sabbatical, and I would make something. Maybe I was kind of like thinking like, if this thing earns $50,000 in revenue, then that would be amazing, and then I'll go back to working for a AAA company again. And I will have had the experience of at least putting something out the door on my own, and that ended up being, well, 7 years now, and across multiple projects at this point. Um, so I definitely had something I thought was going to be sabbatical, and it ended up becoming a career. Um, but yeah, the first project was just me, and I was not intending to start a studio at all. The studio part was entirely by accident.
Okay. So
Um,
yeah. So let's talk about the first bit of. The first project was Tower of Guns.
Correct.
Did
Yeah.
you was that something an idea that you had before you ever went independent, or was that something that just came along?
Not really as an idea. I knew I wanted to make something. I knew I wanted to make a first-person shooter, and that was really it. Because I'd never worked on first-person shooters professionally, and I'd always wanted to. And so it's a different kind of beast than the RPGs that I had spent my career working on. And I wasn't really sure about the details. I just knew that no matter what I did, it had to be something that I could build on my own as quick as possible because I wasn't sure if I was ever going to finish it if I stopped and got too fussy with the art or the design or anything about it. It was like just treat the whole thing like a uh, like a mad dash and see if we can put something together. And looking back at it, I'm kind of uh, I'm happy with the results as they came out, but it's like I definitely see all the places where I was like cutting corners and using some cheap art tricks to me so I didn't have to make more art, and I was definitely treating it like something that was not going to finish it, never going to be finished if I didn't go as fast as possible. And that was my attitude for the entire project. So yeah, I guess I didn't have the idea beforehand, except for that I knew it needed to be fast, it needed to be quick, and I knew it needed to be a first-person shooter, and that was all I knew.
Okay, so with that, you said you were an artist. What was the biggest challenge for you starting this new studio and then having to make a game all by yourself?
Um, there was a lot of ramp up with the engineering side. I had become more and more technical, but I had not ever messed with a um, with more, I guess you would say, gameplay scripting. It had all been entirely in the materials and shaders and technical needs and auditing programs or auditing games and profiling them and stuff. And it hadn't been down the road of scripting, even though I felt fairly confident. Well, there'd been a little bit of scripting back at 38, a little bit, but not much. And the first maybe 6 months of me going down this road was me just teaching myself the fundamentals of engineering, really, teaching myself how to be an engineer. And I'm definitely not an engineer, but at least I can moonlight as one. Uh, like LITE style, very light engineering work for tower guns. It was all scripting in something called Unreal Script, and so I taught myself Unreal Script and built the game. Uh, this was basically my first major scripting project, and in hindsight, it's actually not that badly. Like I thought at the time, it was like this is terribly designed from like a architectural standpoint. But in hindsight, I'm like, this is not the worst thing ever. I've seen worse since then. So yeah, I'm actually kind of proud at that. Considering I didn't know what I was doing, I was smart enough to know where I was going to run into problems and like kind of cordon off code so I could redo it later. And that actually worked out pretty well for me. There's definitely a lot of amateur mistakes in the game's code, but not as many as I first thought there would be when I was first making it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense.
Yeah, there was definitely a ramp up there.
Yeah, and it seems like you have to almost learn a lot of skills on the fly too.
Definitely. And I mean, for the most part, okay, that's probably the most important skill I learned in my entire career was not how to be an artist or how to be a tech artist or how to model something or how to animate something. It was how to learn quickly, because that skill is the most important one, especially any game developer. This industry changes so fast. It doesn't matter what you're learning. So long as you learn how to learn and you know how to learn fast, you can adapt to anything. And you're constantly going to need to adapt. So it's better to get good at picking up new skills and never become comfortable in what you know to the point where you stop learning new things.
Yeah,
So,
that makes a lot of sense because I know for us, one of our other programmer, other than our studio head Kent, his name's Jack, and this is his
mhm.
first time actually programming on a game because he's worked on like other software but never a game before. So for this, that we had some sort of issue. I'm not sure the exacts. There was some sort of sound issue, and working with the engine that we're working with, I know that he could not find the solution anywhere, so he literally had to figure it out, and he did. And I gotta give it to him because he worked hard and he actually figured it out.
Yeah, I hope that depending on what engine you're using, I hope that he passed that information along to either the makers or to some place where people can Google it later.
Yeah, I know he plans to map it out, and we're probably going to post as a blog post on our website at some point.
That's good. Yeah, it's those kinds of things are like that saved my life basically as like learning how to script in Unreal Script. Unreal Script has been abandoned long years gone now. But there was a lot of stuff where it was like just these obscure little bugs or weird compiler errors or like little tiny workflow things that are not super well documented, or maybe they were, but I didn't know where to look. And Finding some random blog post from 2007 that mentioned it in just a single throwaway line, that was where the gold was, and I was like constantly finding like the things I was looking for just in old forum posts or old question and answer places. It was like get your engineer to document that stuff because that's super valuable.
Yeah,
At
I
least
agree.
post it somewhere.
Yeah, they've used because we're using mono games, so they go into those forums a lot just to try to figure out solutions for stuff that they're running into.
Yeah,
So,
the worst thing they could do is reply to the thread where they had like their question initially, if they posed the question to the community, and say, "Never mind, y'all, I figured it out." Like that is the worst thing you could do,
right?
because then
Yeah,
it's like, "Oh, there was an answer, but you didn't post it, and now I have to figure it out myself," and it could take me, well, it could take weeks or be impossible to figure out for some people.
right now someone else is going to come across that post later and be like, "Oh, this is a post someone asked this question. I'm sure someone figured it out," and then there's no answer. So
Right,
it's gonna,
exactly. That
yeah.
is that is infuriating. It's like, what did you find? What did you know?
Yeah, I mean, I get that just go looking for answers for not even like programming related stuff, and I'm just like, well, here's an answer, but it's like, oh, I figured it. It's like, no, that's not the answer. I need. So you continue to
Yeah,
search the internet. So
yeah. And the internet doesn't have all the answers when you're getting to more obscure corners like whatever random bug that you and only one other person in 2007 have seen. So, because
yeah.
that's the land we're talking about when it comes to game development in the indie world. Um, so yeah, I can't remember where you were going with your with the question. I can't remember what your original question
Oh,
was.
so yeah, so um, I was talking about the game and developing the challenges of developing um, your first game, but uh, let's go back to the studio a little bit and for actually forming the studio. What was your biggest uh, challenge outside of actually making the game, as far as becoming a studio?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So honestly, there's a lot of stuff that's pretty straightforward, but is kind of a little bit weirdly written, and you start to learn that there's never a right answer. Um, so like if you ask somebody what kind of company should I form? Should I be, like an LLC? Should I be a sole prop? Should I be a corporation? There's 1,000 different answers what you should be, and it all depends on what you are and what kind of tax repercussions you have and where your team is located. It's like there's a huge what if, and it's a big rabbit hole. And like I have now changed over my company 3 times
Oh
from a
wow.
sole prop, no, 2 times, sorry, from a sole prop to an LLC, and then from an LLC to a corporation. And it has been a very time consuming thing the whole time. And it's like there were a lot of things where it's like, had I known certain things in the very beginning, I might have gone a different route, depending on, what the goals of the company were going to be. And the thing that's really annoying is that nowadays, if you ask someone for advice, you tend to get a lot of hedged answers, and they'll be like, "Well, it depends on your situation," but they won't actually tell you what they would do in your situation.
Right.
Even if you talk to an accountant or a lawyer about your situation, it's very hard to get crisp, clear, concise advice. And oftentimes, I think that's driven out of a place of fear because people are afraid of being liable if they give you bad advice.
That makes sense.
Um, but at the same time, it can lead, and it leads me to indecision because I'm like, okay, well, now I don't know which way to go. And sometimes the right answer is just forward. It doesn't matter which way you're going as long as you're moving forward and not thinking about it for a week, you know?
Yeah.
And I burned a lot of time sitting there trying to learn about different things that were probably not something that was really going to matter in the end too much, uh, as long as I had like the basics down, if that makes sense. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, that totally makes sense. And I think a lot of those decisions, had we not had a team of 5 guys, I don't think I could have made a lot of those decisions on my own. And our studio head Ken is very good about making those decisions.
No,
So
that's good. Yeah, it's and then having a sounding board too. When you're on your own making decisions that probably should be made more by an MBA,
mhm.
you kind of have to just do your best, and then adapt. And the downside is that, okay, well now I'm going to lose time switching from one thing to another, switching from a sole prop to an LLC. But and so like I've wasted some time there, but at the same time, at least you're moving forward and you didn't have it occupying all of your attention. Um, like a good example would be I was a sole prop originally, which is sole proprietorship.
Mhm.
And I converted to an LLC because that was the only thing at the time that Valve allowed in order for you to pay out, in order for you to get a check from them. Well, LLCs were corporations. They didn't allow for sole
Yeah.
proprietorships. Um, but it's like I could have learned that. I could have known that if I had done a little more research about Steam ahead of time.
Mhm.
But Steam wasn't very open at the time ahead of time. So it's like you sign up for an account, you give them all your information, and then they say, "Oh, sorry, you're a sole prop. You need to go be an LLC." So it's like you don't even know you need to change until later. And it kind of I'm focusing in on the corporation type, but like that kind of situation pops up all over the place. It pops up with the kind of bank accounts you have. It pops up with the kind of internet you have, whether or not you have static IP in some cases. It's like, it's very it's just like all this little I guess you'd say red tape
Yeah.
to get your game published from a business standpoint that can be a headache. And that's the best way to put it. It's just a distraction from making the game.
Yeah, I would
Oh.
say that's almost an advantage that we have now, doing it years after so many indie games have come out, that we can take the knowledge from other places and we we actually know not to hopefully not to make a lot of the same mistakes others have in that
Yeah,
aspect.
well, I think the bigger companies have gotten better at it. I don't know if
Hmm.
like it used to be that one of the console providers required you to have a static IP. I don't know if that's still the case anymore. But getting a static IP as an individual was a hassle and not free. So um, like that's just one example. But and it's uh, I don't even know if it's even relevant anymore because I think they may have waived that requirement now for everybody because they realized that so many indie studios were popping up that were run out of people's, garages
Yeah.
that it started to become an invalid requirement.
Yeah, it makes sense because we work remotely, so and our situation's super weird because we're technically based out of Seattle, but three of us live in Ohio, one of us lives in Virginia, so it's like we're in three different states, and it
Right. So by the rules of like 6 years ago, you all would have had to, if you had wanted to submit something to this one platform and like test a build of your game, and I won't name the platform holder, you would have had to all VPN into somebody who was at a place with a static IP and then funnel back to the servers for the console provider to like get whatever you needed from them. So you
wow,
would have been talking about a very slow connection to test like a build. You wouldn't have to do it very often,
yeah,
but whenever you needed to like push something to them or get something from them from their official like game servers, it would have been a pain. Um, and maybe you still need to do that. I don't know. I haven't looked into it, but it was a pain back when we had to.
yeah.
So
I'm not sure about that. We're not quite that far yet, so we'll see if that issue pops up in the future for us. But,
yeah, I mean, it's honestly that's one of the reasons why it's nice to kind of combine with publishers because the publishers can kind of shepherd your game through.
yeah, that makes sense.
It's a small advantage. It's not really that big of that's not the reason to go to publishers, but it is a small advantage that can come with them um, along the way. Is that they can take care of some of the more red tape with dealing with platforms. Um, but yeah, it's a those kinds of little nitpicky things, it's not that they take a whole lot of time once
Hmm.
I know what I'm looking for or how to do them. It's that they going through the question and answer sessions of the whatever particular problem is for the first time involves a lot of research and ramping up and learning, and that is not working on the game, and it's just a distraction from making the game itself, and that's what I should have been focusing on.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So how long was the Tower of Guns development?
3,650 hours or 80
Oh,
hours
wow.
and a half. Well, I can't remember. Hold on. I wrote an article on it. That's why I know the number.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah.
was gonna say that's such a number to just pull out.
Yeah, I wrote it on Gamasutra. It's called "How Long Does It Take to Make an Indie Game?" And I obsessively tracked my time. Um, and it took 3,850 hours and 5 minutes
Wow.
over the course of 600 days, though. So you're talking about
Yeah.
almost 2 years. And that was just to get me to the 1.0. I then had about 6 months of post-launch support on the game. And so I probably put in another 500 hours or so in support, maybe more like 600 or 700 hours after launch. Um, but yeah, it was pretty obsessive. I basically tracked my time like I was like a taxi cab meter, like turning it on or off as new tasks were started. And so that number is pretty accurate for that game. Um, for Mothergunship, which was the follow-up one that I worked on and just released last year, which was not just me anymore. That was me working with other people. That I don't know how long it took, but it was a almost a 2.5 year cycle from start to finish on it. Um, and at the end of that project, there were well over a dozen people on it. There was a lot of people on Mothergunship. Um, there were some with Terrible Posture. There was some with the partner studio, Grip Digital, and there were some external contractors as well. So,
All right.
yeah,
So after Tower of Guns going into Mother Gunship, obviously Tower of Guns had to have been successful.
I think it did all right, especially for a solo studio. It did more
Yeah.
than my goal. I had an original goal,
Hmm.
and it was called my like make the mother-in-law happy goal of like, okay, can this game get to $50,000? Because then it's like, while it wasn't like the amount of money I would have earned if I had been working for a AAA studio for those 2 years,
Hmm.
it would have at least been like, okay, this is real money. This is not like just a hobby anymore, or a side project kind of thing. And I think I hit that within the first week, maybe the first, no, sooner than maybe, yeah, I can't remember how soon I hit it, but I hit that goal pretty quick after launch. And so I was like, okay, I reached the mother-in-law approval goal. And it has gone on to be played by, I don't know, at this point, it hasn't sold millions of copies, but it has been played by millions of people because of things like PS Plus deal and Humble Bundle and Games with Gold. And I ended up partnering with the company named Grip Digital, and they helped me release the game on consoles. Which meant that I didn't have to deal with the console platforms directly, which is nice. And they
Yeah.
also did all of the port work, and that's how it ended up in like the PS Plus deal and the Games for Gold deals. And then I continued working with Grip Digital, and they were the company that I partnered with on Mothergunship. And we were like, let's just make more stuff.
I mean that definitely makes sense. That's what I was actually going to ask you about. Was going next was your partnership with Grip Digital. So it actually started with Tower of Guns.
It did. It started with Tower Guns, and there was a phase in the middle where I was working on some prototypes for other games, and none of the prototypes really stuck with me.
Hmm.
And then Grip approached me asking if I wanted to direct their team uh, to work on a sequel to Tower Guns. And pretty quickly, I counterproposed Mother Gunship as a follow-up. I was like, it's not quite a sequel, but it is a quote unquote follow-up. And that was because of the direction I wanted to take artistically and thematically. And I want to say that of the 2.5 years, I want to say that pitch was in like the third month. So it was pretty early that the Mother Gunship idea, it wasn't called Mother Gunship then. We didn't know what to call it. But the idea of a more sci-fi themed game with crafting elements, which was something they wanted, but I was like, here's how we could do it, which was not how it ended up in the game, which was uh, a great realization that was kind of a collaborative effort. But my original proposal had a much more simpler crafting method or implementation, and had kind of like the rough story in place and such, and rough style and humor tone kind of in place. So yeah, that would have been, we're talking about 2000, late 2015, early 2016 at this point.
Okay. So
Yeah.
going from Tower of Guns to Mother Gunship, with your partner Grip Digital and adding more people. I mean, how did you come to the decision that you could add more people, and who do you get at that point?
Sorry, you cut out there for a second. Skype was being dumb.
Oh,
Could you repeat that?
yeah, I was saying, so how did you come to knowing that you could add more people to Terrible Posture as well as, with your partnership with Grip Digital, and how did you decide who you would add to your team?
Well, it depended on when and who Grip had available and where the project was and what kind of funding we had. We received funding from a couple of different places. Humbles helped support us with the project. So did Epic with a funding grant, and then there was a lot of internal funding as well, from both sides. And it depended on when. Grip was ramping up their team for their own projects, and for them it was like, okay, if we make a hire, is this going to be somebody that's smart for us to bring on for this project and for other projects as well, and kind of like, is now the good time? And then, for me, it was like, who can I afford to bring on? And it was much later that I started bringing on employees, and it was mostly about taking contractors who'd been paid part time at that point and kind of bringing them in full time. So, and that included a senior environment artist on my end and a designer who had helped out with tower guns and Mothergunship both. So, yeah, it kind of really depended, to answer your question. I don't know if there was a clear formula. We knew we needed certain people by the end. The most important hire early on was probably the animator. We struggled for a long time to find an animator that was good for the project. They were trying to do combinations of contracting people and outsourcing animation, and we quickly learned that it's just one thing you cannot outsource unless you have like a really strict workflow complete. Mm-hmm. And we didn't, because we were still trying to figure out what kind of rigs we needed, how would the animation work, how would they interact with the scripts that we had, and the various gameplay elements we needed. And we needed to have someone internal, like embedded on the team. And once Grip found someone, like that stuff soared like crazy. It was like night and day. It was like really fast on the project once that animator came on board with what we could do with characters. Or with villains. There was another key hire. There was quite a few, actually. There was, like, Grip in the end brought on an animation person, and there was a 3D modeler. There was a concept person who we had part-time of, a marketing person we had part-time of. There was another designer. We had a producer for a little while here and there. We had an executive producer a little later on who helped us get the thing out the door, who was actually a designer, but pretty much was a producer, a lead producer. There was... and a couple more engineers who were helping out at various times in the project, one of them for almost a full year. The guy who did the entire crafting system was a technical designer who was fantastic to work with. And then there were level designers on my end who were contractors who were helping me build out all of the levels. And then a environment artist who was helping me build out all of the environments. So meanwhile, I was directing the team and also building out environments myself or other assets as needed. So yeah, it was kind of like really shifted. The project size started out at just 2 people, me and an engineer named Roddick, and we worked in kind of isolation for like 3 months, occasionally getting some help from an artist over on Grip side, but not really that often. And then once we kind of had a direction, we were fluctuating between 2 or 6 people, probably like 2 and 6 people for about a year and a half. And then the last year it ramped up to like 14. It was pretty big by the end. The last 6 months in particular, there was a lot of people on the project. Yeah, it's tough to like pinpoint the exact number of people who were working on it because it changed so much over the project. And then after launch, we kind of went down to just a skeleton crew. There was much fewer people working on it. We were down to like 4 again, 5. Actually, there's about like 5 or 6 on the project who were making updates. And we did 3 or 4 updates all the way up until the last quarter of 2018. And then we were like, okay, we've done what we needed to with this game. Grip wanted to move the rest of their team off to other projects, and I needed to do the same. So that's the story of Mothergunship. But we released, I think it was about 6 months worth of stuff over 3 or 4 updates. I think 3 updates. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's quite a lot of work. Um, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Sorry, I kind of went rambling there, but I was like reminiscing on like, what happened next? What happened next?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
no. There's a lot there. What what challenges did you have with a bigger team that you didn't have just doing it by yourself?
Oh man, all of a sudden I wasn't able to have time to actually do work on development. I quickly went from becoming someone who could make stuff to being someone who had to delegate to other people what to make. And that was hard for me because I still wanted to make things. Like I, at my heart, want to make things. I don't want to tell people what to do. Uh, and I had to kind of really grow into the role of how to direct a team. And we learned pretty quickly because not only were we talking about dealing with a team that was spread out, or not only were we talking about dealing with a team that was like 15 people by the end, but we're also talking about a team that was spread out across, at that point, 4 different time zones,
Yeah.
3 different countries. We had a guy in Germany. We had 2 different cities in the Czech Republic. Guys in Prague, a guys in another city named Zlin. There was me in Boston. There were a few other people in the New England area, and then a dude in Alabama. And I'm probably missing some people. We had partners in California with Humble, and then we also had partners later for the physical version in the UK. Um, so it's like at all times of the night, I was taking phone calls or talking to somebody or sending emails. And even then, with doing whatever I could, I having someone in Grip's offices who was able to act as a producer of the project or figure out who was doing what at what times, that was virtually impossible for me. And so that's where that lead producer came in, and that lead producer was fantastic. He was a great designer, has a great design sense on his shoulders, and also was very good at wrangling together a team. So like uh, he was essentially the like, all right, come in, let's get all this stuff ready for the final push. Let's trim what we need to, focus on what we can, and get this thing out the door kind of producer. Um, but I think he wasn't even trained as a producer. I think he's trained as a designer. Um, but yeah, that dude was great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Um, yeah, and now I'm sure he's the lead designer on whatever their next project is over there.
Hmm.
And I am, they're a super talented team. I think that they're going to be doing cool stuff. I haven't seen what they've been working on, so I don't. I mean, I only know the vaguest sense of it, but I'm sure it's going to be cool because they've grown up a lot over the last 3 years. I've watched them grow as a company and as a team.
So to so now post Mothergunship, what are you working on now?
Well, I haven't announced what I'm working on yet. It's a new project. It's not a first-person shooter. It is a different kind of project for me, and that's really all I'm saying. But there's, like it's the kind of thing I hope I can talk about more in the coming months. But there's a lot of reasons why people don't or do talk about things, and I don't know if you want to get into that, but like,
Yeah, we totally could.
so like as an indie studio, sometimes it's in your best advantage to talk about something up front, and sometimes you actually kind of want to hold back, and it entirely depends on what you're trying to do with the project. Like for Tower Guns, I started talking about it day one. I had people talking to me, interviewing me day one, or not day one, but like early on.
Mm.
I was getting early purchases. I did actually early access, but it was through the Humble widget. It was before Steam even had early access. And it made a lot of sense then to be as open as possible and talk a lot. But now that I've kind of developed a little bit of a resume, um, what I'm working on makes sense to not talk about because I'm working with various partners who maybe want to try and do an announcement in a different way. Maybe they're like, you know what, we'll announce this the way that we want to.
Yeah.
And so while I'm not sure yet what that will be, it's like, okay, I don't want to, I want to still have that as a card that they can play with any potential partners in the future. So it makes sense to actually hold back the announcement of the game. That's part of it so that I can like work with the partner to kind of make that as strong as possible for an announce. But then the other big thing is that what we're building, and honestly, this is the big one for me, what we're building can change. And so
Hmm.
it's like if you announce something, you're just going to get people upset if you decide that you need to change your design. Um, it's one thing if nobody's heard of you and you're just evolving the game and not very many people are actually watching, then it's fine. Yeah, totally be as open and as vocal as you can. But if you have anybody watching you and you promise them something from column A and you say, you know what, we decided to put something from column B in instead and get rid of this column A item, they're just going to be angry, which is a shame. Um, so it's like I don't think it's a wise idea to necessarily announce too much until you feel fairly confident in the direction things are going.
Yeah, I
Oh,
think that's why we're waiting.
yeah,
We
if
want to
you're a
make
bigger
sure.
studio, but yeah,
Yeah, well, we're waiting because we want to make sure that we can put our best foot forward, especially as a new studio. We want people to see the best that we have to offer from the beginning. So
yeah, and that's I mean the best foot forward thing is another big component too. And if you announce too early and nobody pays attention, like you're never going to get an article on Rock Paper Shotgun that says, "Hey, everybody, check out this game that was announced 6 months ago that we just stumbled upon last night." You know,
right,
like you're not going to get that because it's all in theory, it's not necessarily news. Um, you would get it if it's like, "Hey, check out this new Kickstarter," or "Hey, check out this new thing." Like that's I guess that's the other thing too is that you kind of want to save your announcement for when you actually have an action item,
hmm
and that's more of a marketing thing. Um, Everything like when I announced Tower of Guns, I didn't really have any action item. I was just like, "Here's this game I'm working on, hooray!" And I kind of didn't know what was going to come of it, and nothing really did.
right,
Instead, I had to kind of like build up a community over the course of the next 9 months by releasing monthly updates to the game on the Humble widget, and it was like building up a community slowly and surely. Whereas if I had waited a little longer and I had been like, here's the announcement of the game, here's how you can buy it right now, because at that time I announced that you couldn't even pre-order it yet. I don't think you could pre-order it. I don't think you could do anything other than follow me on Twitter.
right,
Um, and there was nothing for people to do to express the to express themselves if they wanted to support the game.
right.
Um, and so like having a way to do that, whether it's signing up for a wish list on Steam. Nowadays, that's the best thing that you could do is signing up for a wish list on Steam or paying for a Kickstarter, like contributing to a Kickstarter, or at the very least having a mailing list set up. I don't even know if I had that. Um, so like having some kind of action item when you announce is useful so that if there's people that you come across that do like it, like every time you have a major piece of news, you're going to get a few more people, and you need to make sure that those people you have something that you can do with them so that they can find out more information later. Um, and the best one is, oh, you can buy the game now. But
Yeah,
obviously that's way late. But I mean, you're starting to see that more and more studios now are being like, hey, we're announcing and we're going live tonight.
yeah, and it's been working out extremely well for a couple. So
Yeah, it's because they're like they know the best shot at getting any kind of press attention at all is going to be in that moment and not 9 months later when people have forgotten about the game. So there's a good argument to be made for that. I don't know whether or not we're going to see more of that. I definitely know we're going to see more of it. I don't know whether or not it's going to become standard. I don't think it'll become standard.
I don't think so either. I think it just depends on the studio and what their goals are and how they want to go about it.
Well, probably also depends on the platform too. It's
That
like
too,
if you
yeah.
have a press release at E3, that's going to be a much bigger announcement than anything you could do on Twitter.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So thinking about what you're saying there, there's a lot of good information there. Have you ever did you ever consider other platforms like Kickstarter or anything like that at any point?
Oh yeah, yeah, quite a bit. And in fact, for Mothergunship, I thought about it a lot too. Like we were looking at Kickstarter and a few Kickstarter similar sites, and we did some hard looking at what we thought we would need and what we thought that the game could generate off a Kickstarter. And also, the most important thing to me is how much time it would take away from the team.
hmm
And in the end, I was like, look, this is going to take away a ton of time, a ton of focus from the team, and maybe it'll result in a good return, but probably not for the amount that it's going to be costing us in time. And I don't know whether or not it would have been a good idea or a bad idea because, like, in the end, Kickstarter is more than just a revenue raising platform. I mean,
hmm
technically, yes, that's what it is still, But honestly, it is nowadays a gigantic marketing platform too. You'll see games that go up there with, like a double A game that has a goal of 50,000, which is, for a video game, that's not very much at all. And you're like, okay, they're going to hit it, but it's not about the money for them. It is about entirely getting the word out about the game, um, and generating, I guess, pre-orders and such, essentially pre-orders for their game. So, I can't think of examples off the top of my head, but you'll see it occasionally where you'll have something that's like, okay, this game's gonna return, $400,000 or $600,000 in Kickstarter revenue, and you just know it's going to do that, and they've asked for like 30. So and you can kind of tell that they thought about it because it'll have like 50 different reward tiers, or not reward tiers, 50 different what do you call them? Not bonus tiers. I can't remember what
backer tiers.
Not the backer tiers.
No, I know what you
stretch goals.
Stretch goals. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're like, okay, if you have stretch goals going all the way up to $1 million, you thought that maybe there was a chance you're going to hit $1 million.
Yeah. You wouldn't just all of a sudden think of that like, oh, we should have stretch goals.
Right. So I mean, it's those ones. I'm not faulting them for it. It's not a bad thing. It's just look at them and it's like, okay, you guys, this is a marketing campaign for your announcement, is what it is. Or maybe there is about the revenue for some of them, but it's you cannot, if you're talking about a team that, especially like if you're talking about these companies in California, and you're talking about them wanting to make a game that has 4 people working on it, or just 4 people living in California, you're not going to be able to do that. You're not going to be able to support them for 2 years with a $20,000 or $30,000 Kickstarter. It's just impossible.
Yeah, definitely not.
Yeah. It's so it's like you have to wonder like what they're thinking, and I think that it's largely about marketing for a lot of those companies, especially if it's an established company. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, that's totally
definitely
fun
not.
too.
I mean, you have to market it. I mean, regardless, you have to market it some way, or else nobody's going to see your game.
Yeah, and I think that it's probably a very good strategy. There's a friend of mine who just finished up their Kickstarter for Skateburb, and it's done very well. And you look at the amount of attention that they've gotten from this Kickstarter, and it's been fantastic. And I'm like, okay, that right there, the attention that you got is probably worth more than the dollar value of the Kickstarter, which was not insubstantial. That's enough to support them for the entire development of the project, but they're super small. Mm-hmm. But like the attention they got was fantastic. It was great to see. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's something they could ride throughout the project. And
right, exactly. Like here's my successful Kickstarter, and oh, by the way, remember me from this Kickstarter from 6 months ago or whatever. You did a write up on it. Would you like to see the final game? It's like gives you in on all these press outlets.
Right.
I mean, press outlets don't really push a whole lot of eyeballs these days, or maybe they do, but they don't. It doesn't translate into a lot of sales.
Yeah.
But they're still important, I feel like.
Yeah, it's interesting in general where the industry's going, because it was like press was king at a certain point, but now it's so fragmented between press and influencers and streamers
yeah, it's fragmented, and even YouTubers. Like there was a period right around when Tower of Guns launched, when the YouTubers were king. The press was not even king back then, not anymore. And right around when Tower of Guns launched, then YouTubers were king, and then Twitch people became king now. But now I've heard that very little of them, and I mean I've seen it, very little any individual source will push any sales, which ultimately is what companies need to survive. So it's important to pay attention to. But like nowadays, people just, if they are watching a stream, it's for the streamer and not for what they're streaming.
Right. A lot of times the top streamers are only streaming like a certain number of games, certain percentage of games.
They're streaming their hobby games, and not unless you're talking about like the 1 or 2 variety streamers who will do all sorts of different games. The people like Vinesauce and Tenchi and stuff. You don't really get too many streamers who check out everything. But the thing is like the top streamers, they charge money for that too. So it's like, it certainly is not worth the return.
Yeah,
for an indie studio at least. Yeah.
yeah, I would agree with that. It's a hard and complicated market, and it's just getting more and more complicated.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, like, okay, so I imagine that you've got a lot of indie developers or hopeful indie developers who listen to this podcast. Um, there's no marketing tool that is more effective that I've ever seen than good placement in a storefront. The carousel placement is the most important thing that could ever happen to your game, in terms of getting people to see it. Uh, like, I don't know why it is, but at least right now, that is the
Mm.
most powerful thing in front of you, is being on that top carousel on the Steam page or on the Xbox store or the PlayStation store.
But if you think about it, that makes a lot of sense because anybody that wants to check out the store and say, "Oh, what's coming out or what's new," or when they see your game as the first thing, then they're gonna be like, "Oh, this looks interesting," so maybe they'll at least check it out. Whereas like it's not
Exactly.
buried somewhere where it's like the 10th thing on a list where it's like, are we really gonna check that out or are we looking for something specific? So
Not to mention, though, any other method here, it's like if they're on let's say it's Steam, if they're on the Steam store and they see something on that carousel and it's interesting, they're going to be like, oh, add to cart, or oh, wish list it for when it goes on sale later.
yeah,
Whereas if they see it on a streamer they like, they're going to be like, oh, okay, now I got to go open up Steam. Oh, okay, now I got to go search for it by name, or click on the link and have it go through the like, are you sure you want to open up this link? This looks like it's to an external site, and and then it's like, okay, now you've gotten every time you have to go through a hoop like that, you probably carve away 70% of the people.
yeah, it's putting up a new barrier.
Yeah,
Because I mean, when it comes down to it, people are lazy. I mean, I'm that person that's lazy too. That's like, oh man, I have to click through this and this and this and this to do this.
right. It's
So
like, oh man, to get this game I want to play, I have to go search for it on. It's like, come on. I mean, I'm that same way too, but like I'm eye rolling at myself for being that lazy because it's like for something I want to enjoy,
yeah, I'm with you.
and I'm being, it's like I should really put more effort into it. But it's honestly it's because it's I don't know. It's like there's some kind of inertia that you have to kind of battle.
Yeah,
To
we've kind of I think we've gotten so used to the convenience of modern technology that
Yeah.
it's like if it's not like a button press away, we're like, oh, it's not a button press away. Who does that?
Well, maybe it's also the mindset too. When you're in
Yeah.
Twitch or when you're watching something on YouTube, you're in watch mode and you're like,
Mm,
okay, I don't want to alt tab over, like pause the video, alt tab over, go buy this game, or click the link in the description and then, log into Steam because Steam can never remember your login if you look at it in a browser.
yeah.
Um, so it's like, yeah, I mean, there's inertia there.
Yeah.
And that fighting that inertia, it happens because I certainly will go through, log in, wish list the game because I'm like, I want that game that much.
Mhm.
But like that inertia is your biggest enemy as an indie developer.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with you. That's interesting. I mean, that's good to know, especially for any aspiring indie developers, including myself out there, to just make it as easy as possible for people to get to what you're putting out there.
Right, as easy as possible, and show them something that gives them a reason to go through it. If you've got just another match three puzzle, you're probably not going to get people who are going to wishlist your game on Steam. Probably not. If you've got a match three puzzle game with superpowers and every single character from the Marvel universe, then okay, maybe now you're talking. But you got to have something going on there.
Yeah, you have to have something that will draw in people, for
Yeah.
sure. Um,
Um, hmm?
so going into the future, where do you see Terrible Posture Games going?
Okay, so Terrible Posture Games is still really small. We are still single digits people, and we're working on our next project. And I'm hopeful that, like by this time next year, we'll be talking about it, if all goes according to plan. But it is the kind of thing that I'm at this point now, and this is a really weird thing for me to have gone from being completely solo, like. Let me back up a little bit. When I went to go work on Tower Guns, I had some friends who came to me and were like, "Hey, we want to work with you, Joe. We think we could do something cool with you. We could make some interesting, cool game." And I turned them down
Yeah.
And it's not because I wouldn't have wanted to work with them, because one of them I am now working with, actually, because I did end up, working with them later. But it was because I wanted to do something risky and something fast and something relatively janky to to call it, quite frankly, what it is with Tower of Guns. I wanted to do something where I was like, let's just get something out and see how it goes. And I wanted to be a little bit temporary with it, I guess you will. I was like
Hmm.
making this game, wasn't sure how I was going to go, and then I was going to maybe go back and apply to someplace else. And I wanted to not be responsible for anyone else other than me. With 38 Studios, I had watched this company of 300 people completely vanish through no fault of my own. And I'm like, well, you know, if I'm going to be working on another project, whether or not this project succeeds or fails, I want that to be up to me and my decisions or my own failures, not someone else's failures. And I guess I was kind of burned on working in groups of people.
Yeah.
And Tower Guns was very much a solo, almost cathartic experience of like working just on my own. And that was awesome and excellent. And in order to achieve more ambitious ideas, I needed to kind of bring on more help and get more assistance from other people and start working more collaboratively again. And I think I'm certainly in the mind place now where I can do that. But a whole new fear has come to my mind now, and now it's no longer the fear of me myself failing because of my own inability to achieve something the way I wanted to. But now I have the fear of letting down all these employees.
Yeah.
Now I am responsible for their livelihoods. I'm responsible for their well-being and for their family's well-being, and I'm taking that very seriously. So when you ask me about what I want to see in the future, I want to see Terrible Posture Games continue to do well enough that the people I have under my employment are still employed. I want to make sure that I'm caring for them in a way that is responsible and sees them grow as developers. And I want to continue to make projects that are exciting to work on. But I want to make sure that if the studio grows, we're growing in a way that is sustainable, and in a way that the studio can support them for years to come, not just for a single project. So that's what I'm looking forward to and trying to achieve with Terrible Posture Games. The employees that we've got now, um, and there aren't many of them, but I want to make sure that they feel safe and secure in their job. So there, take that.
We took it. No, I think that's a great place to come from, especially if you're looking at your employees first, and that's always a plus side and not something that everybody does with a business, because you see a lot of people that are just like, hey, let's make money, 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 but they're not.
Well, I mean, it's a little cynical because making the money, there's okay, yes, you need to make money in order to
Yes.
keep the
Hmm.
people employed, but I think it's more about how you spend money. And it's
Yeah.
like, okay, how can I spend money in a way that's reasonable and not wasteful? Um, there are places where spending money makes a lot of sense if you've got money to spend on marketing and you need to, but I don't want to spend, tens of thousands of dollars to get the streamer to stream the game only to have three people go buy it afterwards. I'm like, that's,
It's a
you know,
waste. Yeah.
it's a waste. And I mean, you can argue that maybe they start a snowball going, and I have seen that sort of snowball happen. But these days, these streamers have so many different games to play. The top streamers are not going to stream your game and cause a gigantic snowball from just the amount of budget that we have. If you have the amount of budget that like a large AAA game has,
Hmm.
maybe you're in a different category.
Well, plus it's unpredictable. So your game could cause a snowball. It could not. It's not guaranteed.
Right? It's not guaranteed, and it's yeah, it's I think that it's for an indie game you have to be very, very careful. For an indie studio rather, you have to be very, very careful with how you spend so that you can take care of your people. Now, I mean, I have an obligation to make a game that is going to earn back what it costs to make.
Hmm.
If that makes sense, I want to make a game that does well, but that is an objective that is complementary to keeping us all happy and healthy and excited to make games, and not contrary to.
I think that's a smart approach.
Hopefully, yeah. I mean, I think every developer, every boss, I think probably approaches things that way, but I don't know. I guess there are varying degrees of success when it comes to hitting it, and hopefully we can. Hopefully we'll talk to you in a year and we'll be in okay place. We'll see.
Yeah, I was gonna say we'll definitely have you back after the next game's out, and we'll see how it's doing and that sort of thing.
Cool.
So anyway, Joe, I want to thank you for coming on today.
Well, no problem. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this has been a pretty great discussion. I can't wait to put it out.
Cool.
Where can people find you?
So you can find me on Twitter at blank slate Joe. Also, you can find me on Twitter at terrible posture. You can also go to terribleposture.com where it right now forwards to the Mothergunship page, which has links to buy the game in multiple different places. That's the most recent game, and that's that we've worked on. That's been out, and that's the most immediate way that you could support the company and support our efforts. But yeah, following on Twitter is probably the best thing to do. So at blank slate Joe.
All right, thanks, Joe. I appreciate
All
you
right.
being on.
Thank you so much. It was good to talk to you, Trevor.
You too. And that wraps up episode 8. Wasn't that a great talk with Joe? I want to thank Joe one more time for coming on the podcast. We really appreciate him being on the show. If you're an indie developer and would like to come on and talk to us, definitely reach out to me. You can reach me at social media at winterborngames.com. You can also email us questions if you're just a listener. Anything that you would like us to answer. We would like to throw that out and be able to answer some questions for you. So you can send it to that same email, social media at winterborngames.com. I read every single email that goes into there. So I will definitely read it. I will definitely see it. So again, thank you to Joe. You can follow him at Blank Slate Joe on Twitter. Have a conversation with him. He's a great dude, and I wish him the best of luck on his next game that he hasn't announced yet. Once it's out there, we'll definitely try to have Joe back on again for him to talk about the process of getting his next game out there. But until then, follow him at Blank Slate Joe, and you can follow us at Winterborn Games on Twitter, Facebook, etc. And thank you guys so much for listening. We appreciate your support. And if you are able to, don't forget to go on iTunes, rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. If we were on YouTube, I'd tell you to hit the bell, but we're not. So if you would like us to be, or if you have any other platforms that you think that you would like to listen to us on, please let us know. And we'll see if we can put ourselves on those platforms. But again, thanks to Joe. Thank you guys for listening. And we'll be back next week.